In this video, the middle-aged nerds discuss spoilers from books they read decades ago. Do you really need a spoiler alert? Do you really?
Hi, I'm Glenn the Geeky Hippie.
And I'm Bill, also known as Matt Stagger, and welcome to Non-Terrestrial Half-Life. We take books we read in the first half of our life and reread them to see if they stand the test of time. Occasionally, we do run across books that one of us hasn't read. As long as the guest and another member has, then we go ahead and do them, and that happens to be this case. We are joined once again by Peter, the accidental actor. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me again. I hope you can hold on to it after 4 episodes.
No, absolutely. I mean, we're doing To Green Angel Tower Part 2
Yep.
today by Tad Williams, and ooh, did I love this?
It was a good suggestion from Peter.
I mean, it's my favorite trilogy.
That's
honestly.
awesome.
Yeah, it's above Lord of the Rings for me. There's some sluggish parts in there, particularly the singing. Makes me want to scream. This, on the other hand, like I said, I didn't have any problems with the flow. I love the story. Definitely my favorite trilogy that I've read in fantasy so far.
In the prose.
Oh my God. Yeah.
You see why I've been praising the prose for so long, and
I do.
I think somebody that recently did a YouTube video earlier this year about the top 10 prose in fantasy is going to be addressing that video when they reread this series. He's planning on rereading this soon.
I'd put him up there with Le Guin. I mean, they're neck and neck for prose for me.
Williams was entirely missing from that list, and I was so surprised that he left him off. I was like, oh, you can't. But I know he's going to reread it soon, so hopefully he'll be like, I need to edit that.
Yeah.
So you can tell everybody that this is the most exciting read about walking up the stairs.
There's a lot of going upstairs and going down tunnels and climbing mountains, climbing down mountains, climbing through tunnels,
jumping roofs, stuff.
And dropping a big sword and having to go back and fetch it.
Yeah, a lot of dropping indeed. Yeah.
There was an uncomfortable part at one point. I think it was the first half of the book, if I remember correctly. Simon was a little bit improper at night, at camp when he curled up next to her. I just think that was a little inappropriate of him.
That was this in the second half. Yeah. To be fair, they had cuddled the night before, so he figured, okay, we're just gonna cuddle. So he went and laid down next to her, and she was like, yeah, and went to the other side of the fire. If he would have got up and went to her then, okay, that is inappropriate. But given what happened the night before, he's not out of his mind for doing that.
He was touching her back and everything. That was when she was sleeping. That was a little just, don't do that, Simon. Don't do that.
Well, she said no and he stopped. So, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. He said no and she said no and he stopped. And by the way, he's still the boom calf in that sense.
Yeah.
He is blundering his way as we all did.
And I love.
You forget he's going through puberty, man. I mean, do you remember those days? Everything is confusing. You cuddled the night before, so he just assumed, okay, this is okay. We didn't do anything other than cuddle the night before, so maybe, we can cuddle now. And she said no. He said, oh, okay. My bad.
Yeah.
Still, it was just, one of the things I loved, you mentioned the word mooncalf, and I noticed in my last reread that's actually the last word of the novel itself. There's an afterword that takes place after it, but the last word was calling him a mooncalf. It was Rachel. Yeah. That scene kind of brought tears to my eyes when she came back up from underground and she found Simon. That was a little bit teary-eyed.
That was surprisingly emotional.
I love the whole interplay of her leaving food out for somebody else, Simon finding the food and drinking it, her thinking it's somebody else. I mean, that whole interplay was fun.
Yeah.
Kind of led power to that final reveal that, oh, Simon's alive.
So we've already talked about when we first read this book, because we all pretty much read it. Well, Bill, we know when he read it. I read it when it came out as one novel. Peter, did you read it as one novel or two?
No, I read it as two.
Okay, so you read
No.
this late. You read this out?
I think this was. I think the Dutch translations were pretty early on, so somewhere mid-90s. And I think you were a member of a book club then. I don't know if you recall that, but you had a quarterly or something with books in it, and you could order things like that. And I think I had the 4 of them in sort of 1 year when I started reading it. So something like that.
Okay.
And I think every quarter I had 1 book. So that's how I got it.
That's how I got a lot of the Dragon Riders of Pern books, was through the Science Fiction Fantasy Book Club.
Mm.
With Penny, you get like 10 books, and then you keep paying after, and
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those book clubs. Those were cool.
Yeah, and how much money do you still owe him?
Oh, probably a lot. What are your memories of reading this one, Peter?
Um, in a certain sense, the same as the other books. Just keep on reading. Once you start it, you just don't stop. Surprisingly, I was forgotten quite a bit of the end. I sort of had a vague recollection of that, what happened at the end, but how it exactly ended, I was aware of what happened to Rachel. That was something that got stuck. But the meeting in the end, how they all got out in the end, completely forgotten. And also the walk up the stairs with the how should we call them? Dvargen? Is that the proper pronouncement?
Worgen.
And that I completely forgot that. While that is something what note I also noticed now, and I don't remember if I noticed it then, but the world building just keeps going and going and going almost to the end. So
Yeah.
it leaves. You say it's an afterword. It leaves open for the sequel, which came out 30 years later. And yeah, that still adds to the world building, surprisingly.
Still got 1 or 2 more books coming in set in Ostenard, because he's also got a prequel series now going, which I haven't touched yet. I have to finish The Last King of Ostenard before I jump to that. But
Yeah.
I had completely forgotten probably the last, I'm going to say 3 hours of the audiobook. I had forgotten the big twist that they were basically doing Inaluki's bidding the entire time, bringing the swords there. That whole, when they figured that out, that, Priorities wanted the swords there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had forgotten all about that. I had forgotten entirely about Joshua being killed, his fake death. Because
I didn't buy it for a second. I'm gonna tell you right now, I didn't buy it for a second.
No, okay.
I didn't, I at all, But yeah, I can see why you wouldn't buy it, because he was very particular in the way he described the death.
Yeah, he uses he makes it sound like it was a blunt strike in the prose, and I'm like, okay, I don't hear any, and nobody's talking about blood or anything like that coming from him. So was that just a knockout blow? Because he does mention the arm going up, and I'm like, did he block? I'm not sure what's happening. So, but I didn't think he was dead. I'm like, there's no way. And then when they couldn't find the bodies in the rubble, I'm like, I knew it.
Right. And it turns out it was Chekhov's manacle. That manacle he's had there the whole time.
Yeah, but I mean, think about that. You're setting that up in book 1.
Yeah.
That is surprising. A lot of things that if you read, well, let's say, for sake of argument, the last 5 chapters or so, there's a lot of it which you read about in in the early chapters in book 1, and that's surprising.
Yeah.
And it is still there, and it just keeps going, and still beautifully written.
That's the thing. I mean, I could literally read his grocery list if he wrote it with that prose.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd read it.
Yeah, I fully agree with you.
Be surprised if he
Definitely.
does.
Yeah, good one.
He does. Isn't there a book after this? The Heart of What Was Lost.
Yeah, that's a bridge novella that bridges this trilogy
With the next one, right?
Austin Art.
Yeah, because I have it on my wish list on Audible, and I'm like, okay, I need to know when to read this. I think it's in between the two because I am absolutely getting that and probably listening to that this week.
It's a quick read.
In that sense, it's a bit surprising that this, well, for lack of a better word, trilogy has not such a great following as, for example, Wheel of Time, which has a massive online, presence is
Right.
perhaps the good description. And it is there, and if you are aware of it, you can find it. And the man himself makes perfectly decent commercials, has also for himself, and has written a number of decent books afterwards, very decent. And but it is not as easy to access as, well, the major ones like Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, etc., etc.
And you don't find people who know it.
You know, I've heard of it, and I think that's the sort of the way with most fantasy fans I've come across. Like, yeah, I've heard of that. It's on my TBR. I'm like, you need to move it up.
Yeah,
it's really necessary. You need to move it up.
Hesitated, because it is 30 years old. There's a lot of people who won't touch it.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for them. They are missing out because this is, like I said, beautifully written, and this is the bridge between old fantasy and sort of modern fantasy. This is one of the bridges. There are a couple, but I mean, this is one of them. Absolutely. This is one of the pillars that led us on to modern fantasy. And to not give this a shot because it's 30 years old is just asinine, in my opinion.
Yeah. These are the shoulders that, giants that are being stood on.
Yeah.
Like these fantasy writers.
And it's still growing, of course. There's a book in between. There is the new trilogy from, is it by now 5 years ago or something that you wrote it? 2018, 2019, something like that. So, which I must confess, I have not read myself.
Yeah, I haven't read more than just Shadow March. Not Shadow March.
Yeah, that's Shadow March I read.
Yeah. Otherland, the one I've only read the first book from. And that's one
I read as well, definitely. That is something completely different, though.
Yeah, I think in the next, make sure to read through the rest of his stuff.
Yeah, I have all of his stuff like saved in my wish list because I'm like, all right, let's dive into some other stuff he's done to sort of compare and contrast. But I mean, given his writing style, I don't think I'm going to have an issue there.
No, definitely not.
This is his masterpiece, though. This is one of the masterpieces of fantasy, in my opinion.
Oh, I'd agree.
Just this trilogy alone is why Ted Williams is in my top 5 favorite authors. He's number 5. He's number 4 and number 5. I waver back and forth, but just from this trilogy alone, and that's up there with like Tolkien and Jordan and Peter F. Hamilton, who is my favorite living author, and then Andrei Sapkowski, because I love The Witcher books so much. Those are my, and Raymond E. Feist, those are my 5. And the order changes a bit, now and then, but I will forever love this series. I don't know. The prose just blows me away. I can't get past it. I really do think it's better than Ursula Le Guin. I think it's better than pretty much any of the other prose we've read on this channel yet. And
I think it's hard to say better. It's just different.
yeah,
Um,
I
hers
enjoy
is
it.
a lot more old school, and you get that certain poetical flow. His is just different, but it's that same sort of poetic flow, but in a different flow, if you
I
get what I'm
enjoy
saying.
the prose more. I enjoy the prose more, and that's not a dog. I don't want to sound like I'm dogging on her prose at all,
No,
because
that's fine.
it's like comparing, like 99.9% with 99.9.999%. It's like
Yeah.
it's just relative.
I only buy physical copies of books that I fall in love with, so I am totally ordering these 100% physical copies, to
Hardcover or
display. Oh yeah, always.
hardcover.
Yeah.
So you're gonna do Green Angel Tower as a book.
Yeah, here in the US it's mostly available as one. So it's thick. It's a big daddy. So,
With thin paper, very thin leaf paper.
but yeah, I'm definitely planning on buying the physical copies as well so I can have those, it's going up on the top shelf where all my loves go.
Are there special editions of this trilogy? I'm not really into that, but
I'm sure there are. Let's
There
see.
might. We've got a man in the chair right here. He's going to check.
ah,
So, Peter, the first time you read this half of the book, who would you say your favorite character was? This half of the book.
that is, it's getting harder because there's so much going on with so many people, and they are all equally important for the story. I think. Yeah, if you lose one of the storylines, then you would miss bits and pieces in the other storylines because they add something to their story. However, I'm going for Kadrach. How do you call that in English?
Right.
Patrick. I think in the end, I still think he lives, by the way.
Oh,
And uh,
see.
I was thinking about it, and I sort of he has heavily PTSS, I think. What is it?
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he even, despite the fact that he is again broken because he again bows to Piratus, again that survives. He goes back and still remains and does his lost trick, and then fades out of the story. I think he lives, but I don't know. But they have not found his.
Look at
His
this special edition, $200.
that's a lot.
Yeah. That's
That's
from
a cover.
Grim Oak.
That's a gorgeous cover, though.
That is, man, that is beautiful. Look at that worm.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
I thought
$200. That's a
controversial.
lot. Yeah. I think, despite everything, most valuable player, Kadrach.
I thought I was going to be controversial saying Cadrak. It's not like I like him as a person, as a character.
He
I
is
think
a
as a
pain in
he's
the
the
ass.
best character in this half of the book. He's just complex. I mean, you feel for him, but you hate him at this,
Yeah,
at the same
absolutely.
time. Just it, the emotions I feel towards him are complex, and
He's
thinking
a
through.
more he's a more sympathetic Patton Fane.
Ooh,
Interesting comparison. Yeah.
I don't know if it'd go that dark, but
Well, like I said, he's more empathetic because he's sort of been tortured into this. It's almost like Golem mixed with Patton Fane. Because in the end, he is a betrayer and working
Yes.
for the other
yeah,
side, period. So, you can say it's
that's
not dark, but that's pretty friggin' dark.
he was evil at the core to start. Pat and Fane was evil to start. I don't think Patrick Cadrak was evil to start.
No,
So
I don't think Patton Fane was as a freaking toddler or teenager either. So,
Nobody starts evil.
Yeah. Everybody's the
Right.
hero in their own story.
Right.
Definitely.
Now, characters that I like as people, it's still Benedict. Benedict is still my
Benedict is
favorite
fine.
in this series.
I mean, Benedict is amazing.
You can't not love Benedict.
Yeah, seriously.
Definitely. Absolutely.
His son is an interesting character too in the next series.
Mhm.
Because it's a next generation series, because 30 years later, can't expect Simon to go out adventuring 30 years later. I mean, he's only my age. And that's the thing I realized this week. The first time I read this series, I was pretty much Simon's age. This time reading the series, or this time reading the new series, the new series that's coming out, I'm Simon's age. Ted Williams likes writing for my age, apparently.
Well, I
Oh.
mean, when talking about characters, you want to get complex. Camaris is very,
Yeah.
very
definitely.
complex. That
Yeah.
character really stood out the second half of the book. I'm like, dude, this guy is deep, disturbing, and awesome at the same time.
He is pretty badass with a sword, that's for sure.
Yeah. Until the sword takes over, he's very impressive.
Could you
Yeah.
imagine what it was like when he was young?
Oh man.
That must have been something.
He belongs on my list of top 20 swordsmen.
Like up there with Lan.
Okay.
Yeah. But he would probably be the list I've got. There's like 11 people that are like so close to each other that I note that these people. It's just like on any given day, any one of them could beat the others. It's just they're relatively ordered, but they're so close to how they're there. He would be in that bunch with Lan and people like that.
Okay, is Conan on this list?
No, I've never read Conan.
Okay.
No, actually, I did read a Conan novel, but Conan's nah.
You have to have
But,
Driss Stewart on it after you finish the Dark Elf trilogy.
yes, well, I finished that before. He's on there.
Okay, good.
He's on the list.
I was gonna have
somewhere.
to disown you and disband this channel if you said otherwise.
I'll make sure he's on there. I'll edit it if he's not.
I appreciate that for my own sanity.
Yes, Drist is pretty awesome. Yours, who would you say your favorite character is? Would you go Camaris then? Is that what you're saying?
Honestly, as far as engaging and keeping me glued to the page, it was Camaris in the second half. I mean, every scene he's in is sort of pivotal, and he's doing something, even if it's just fading into the background and having a conversation that we don't find out till about later. But Josha comes out looking like he's seen a ghost. You're like, okay, I don't know what he said, but he said something.
Right.
Yep.
He's a good character. How has your life experience changed your perspective on this story, Peter?
Oh, in that sense, given the fact that we are 30, 35 years on, quite a lot.
Yeah.
In that sense, it remains the same as the previous parts. 35 years ago, you read the story of Simon. Now you have much more eye and even compassion, I think is the word I'm looking for all the other bits and pieces. And even in the closing, is it? No, it's not the afterword. It's the last chapter, I believe, where Iskrimur and his wife say goodbye to their son.
Yeah.
You have lots more compassion for that, and it is much more heartfelt than it was, I think, 35 years ago.
Yeah, I definitely found myself identifying more with the adults in the book, than I ever did in previous reads. Even when I read it in my 20s and 30s, I don't think I identified with the adults nearly as much. But until I was 35, I still thought I was 15. So that might just
It's a mental issue.
Yes, that's all on me. But yeah, I mean, Iskrimner it is probably the character I found myself understanding so much more than I ever did before. And
Definitely.
that's without me having a kid of my own, but I could still, I've watched a niece, nephew grow up, so, vicariously there is somewhat of, that there, but yeah, I really liked him a lot. And of course, I had a lot more respect for Tiamat, than, than I did as a kid, because he just went, I don't know. I don't remember really paying attention to Tiamat much the first time I read this, but this time, this read through, he's kind of like just like super badass in my opinion. Going all the way back from when we first meet him, he's just really awesome. And I just don't remember loving the character as much previously as I do today. But my love for Benedict has always been there.
I mean,
That's just
as for
That
me,
is
I read this as an ensemble sort of piece more than strictly on Simon. So, I mean,
yeah.
he kind of introduced us to the world, but we jumped around a lot. So, to me, it was sort of more ensemble. I don't know if it would have been that way if I was young. I probably would have focused on Simon
Right.
if I was a teenager when I read this, which is when it came out. So,
And what also is happening with people like Kadrach, but also Tiamat and Benebek, they are basically the nerds of this, because they are this group of, yeah, they're basically the learned. They like to explore and like to find things out in their own way, and they don't care much about the others around them if they get a chance, because they get lost instantly in whatever they are doing, and who cares what the rest of the world does. But they don't get much of time for that, unfortunately.
well, I love that he has a quote for everything. Benedict has a quote for everything. Doesn't matter what it is, he's got some sort of quote or piece of advice or old saying for everything. He's like Lenny from the Wheel of Time.
Oh yeah,
Very
yeah. Oh,
much.
that's an interesting comparison. Yeah.
I found I really enjoyed Joshua a lot as a character.
Yeah, I did.
The more so the fact that he never wanted to rule. To the point where when he saw the opportunity to avoid being crowned king, he took it, and I'm just like, the respect that gets from me is just immense.
Well, I mean, that goes
Yeah.
back to the old saying, those who don't wish to lead are the ones who should.
Yeah. And Joshua was a great leader, and a heck of a swordsman too, especially missing a hand, missing his original hand, because I think he was originally a righty. That's the hand he's missing, isn't it?
Yeah, he definitely would have kicked Jamie Lannister's ass.
Yeah.
One-handed
Jamie.
guy to one-handed guy, he would have taken him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
didn't think of that one as well. Yeah. Oh, that's didn't see that one. Yeah, but cool comparison again.
It's well, Martin has made no secret of the fact that he was incredibly inspired by this series to write A Song of Ice and Fire. He said it a number of times, and you see it all over. From the White Walkers / others, if you read the books, Jamie Lannister. Can't tell me Joshua wasn't somewhat of an inspiration for Jamie Lannister's situation. Some parts of Jamie's situation.
I was about to say, yeah, not most of his personality, but some of his physical stature.
Yeah.
I don't see much nobility in Jamie for the most part.
What are some themes that stood out in this one for you? I'd say I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. That whole, game that Priorities, that played, Inaluki played of, the false messenger, the trickery, I don't think I can't think of another fantasy or science fiction series where there was a similar, scheme going on by the bad guys and had the good guys so completely fooled as we see in this. Deception, I guess, would be, there's a lot of deception, going on here.
And
The author deceiving us as well.
I'd definitely say duplicity, and it comes out from pretty much everywhere. At the end of the book, you're like, okay. So they've been doing this. They've been doing basically, the bad guy's bidding the entire time without even knowing it. And he set it up so beautifully that you don't even notice until it's pointed out to you. You're like, oh, oh
Yes.
crap.
And then we're too late.
There's
Yeah.
a great thing Simon says to Elias and Anuluki. I will fear you, but I won't hate you.
Yep.
And it's kind of that was kind that's where they lost. That's where Anuluki kind of lost.
Well, yeah, it weakens him. And I think it's the act of empathy, the act of caring and understanding his antithesis to what he stands for. So it in fact wounds him. And I love that.
Yeah.
Yep. That was beautiful. That was a beautiful piece indeed. And also the awareness that it worked, that apparently because that's not always obvious in this case. But here he had despite the fact he was basically taken over by the sword, he sort of had that thought and still came out of it on top.
Yeah. What do you think of Miriam L being the one to kill her father?
You know what? I think it was necessary, honestly. She was holding on to that childlike innocence, and that one shot was basically the death of her innocence finally, understanding this is not my father. This is not the man I knew. This is somebody else. My father is lost. And accepting that is a very adult moment. And that is the moment where I think she really comes into her own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a woman, and you're like, okay, she gets it. It's not pretty. Nobody should have to do that, especially to their own parent. But at the same time, it's kind of pivotal.
Yeah. And he had so not been her father
No.
for quite a while.
It's very harsh, but it is inescapable.
Yeah.
She is basically the only one that can do it. And she does it with Simon's arrow. But I'm wondering if that makes a distinct difference. Although it is also probably made with that arrow has it been made with the words of making? That I don't recall.
It is a witness.
Yeah, it is a witness, definitely.
So yeah, absolutely.
I thought the scale was the witness, the mirror. That was the witness, I thought.
The arrow is also a witness.
Was it? I missed that. I don't know how I missed it. I don't remember that being a witness. I remember just the scale, the mirror that he broke to cut the rope. Yeah. That was a witness.
Yeah, oh, that is good you say that. When he broke the mirror, they talked about how they were creating the third house. They've created these houses along all the books, and nobody noticed anything about it. Sort of, is this important? No, it happens, and there's all things happening why you sort of miss why it is so important. And he walks twice along that where they built the fifth house and the pool. He walks twice, at least once or twice. And now he walks there with the forgive me. Simon walks along it when he goes out. So in book 1, he walks along it when he walks towards the tower, along it because he drinks from it. And then the Sinti and Tiamat fight their Utuk'ku. Then they come back, and they lose. By the way, also not unimportant. But then we basically at that moment is the moment when we realize how important those houses actually are.
Yeah, I just showed a map of all the 5 houses, and you can
I know.
see,
Yeah.
yeah, it's everywhere they've been, pretty
Yeah.
much. They've created the houses without even knowing it, which
They've
is
been
Exactly.
doing
awesome.
they've been doing the Dark One's deeds for them.
Yeah, I love that because you do not realize it until the very end. You're like, oh my, oh wow.
So, how do you feel about Pryrates as a villain? Do you think he had depth, or do you think he was just a bit too almost cartoony at times? I mean,
The thing with Pirates is we only see him from the perspective of others.
Yeah, we never get a glimpse inside his own
Yeah,
head. So,
exactly. Uh,
I think he's unabashedly evil.
yeah,
yeah,
And like I said, it's done blatantly. He doesn't apologize for it. And I
yeah.
love that for him. I mean,
he turned evil.
I love a bad guy that I can hate, and he makes it easy to hate.
Yeah, I do wonder when he turned evil, though. You know, was it before he became a priest? But after he became a priest? Before he joined the League of the Scroll? After?
Is that not
You know,
something Morgana says? Then we are, I think, very early on in. Is that
Uh,
when
I think it was book two,
Simon is
wasn't
now when Simon and Jeremiah are refused by becoming guards or something like that, castle guards or something like that, and he wants to learn magic, and he said like piratas, and Morganas started laughing about it. He said, and he says something in the lines of, if you want to learn, you study. And what Piratas does is not study, but he, in the darkest night, leaves the door open and sees what comes
yeah,
in, uninvited, if I remember correctly. That
yeah,
says
that,
something,
it?
by the
Yeah, that
way,
was book one.
about,
That was early.
yeah, that was very early. So, but now you say that sort of what you said, sort of, I realized, yeah, that is something that says about Piratas, but that is one of the very few things of moments that we hear, and again from the outside, about the inner workings of Piratas as a person. He apparently doesn't care what comes in and what it does to him.
yeah, and he paid for it.
As long as it
And
gives him power. But yeah, that
yeah,
same arrogance is what killed him.
yeah,
So, and I
exactly.
love that.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
tried to
that was
save his.
unavoidable because they had to get rid of him sooner or later. But it was good that uh, he was too greedy at the end. He should have waited a minute longer or so, and then he would have made it. Perhaps I was thinking
Shouldn't have tried to stab Inaluki in the back.
exactly. Yeah,
I mean, you tried to put a harness and collar on. It's like,
yeah,
what'd you think was going to happen? He was going to be okay with it and go, thanks, dude.
yeah,
No.
yeah. No, true.
All
Like I
right,
said, that
so
arrogance just came back to bite him.
I have a feeling I can guess the answer to this question. Were there any elements that you don't think would fly in today's social or political climate?
There is nothing
Nothing?
that won't fly. However, I think that if it would have written nowadays, that Miriam would have been played a somewhat bigger part in the whole story. And because did you say that last episode or the episode before that, Matt, that Miriam, yeah, she just get dragged on by the others, and that is, yeah,
Yeah,
that is a there's truth in that, and you see that again here because she is, until we are in the tower when she takes, well, the arrow, the bow shot. Um, a, I think that would have been distinctly different, and that it would have been more on more equal footing between Simon, Miriamela, and Binabik.
I
But
think
that's the only thing I can think of.
I mean, yeah, it's not so egregious that, you know,
No,
it
definitely.
upsets
No.
me or anything. But I mean,
Right.
yeah, there are sections of the book where I wish she maybe had more autonomy.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's so beautifully written that I'm like, that's not
Yeah.
that big of a deal. I will be interested in seeing how he deals with female characters moving forward.
Yep.
I got a feeling, there'll be a lot more growth for
Yeah,
the female characters in particular.
you'll be pleased, I think. There's still a lot of, and it's not just the female characters, but there's still a lot of the characters uh, don't have control over their life, don't have as much agency as we might want them to. Even Simon really doesn't have a lot of agency through a lot of these books, this trilogy. A lot of this trilogy, he was being carried along by the flow of the stream too. And, he reacted to what was happening to him. I'm not saying entirely as bad as, Miriam had it, but he didn't have a lot of agency either.
He could have ducked out at any time and just went and become a farmer. I mean, on one of his many trips to go do whatever fetch quest, he could have just said, you know what? Nah. And in the middle of the night, go become a farmer. He chose not to. So, on that hand, not so much. It's not like he was held prisoner like Miramel was. That was, that's no agency. He had choices. He made them. I can respect his choices, but yeah, you're getting into that. Is it free will or is it fate thing? When you start talking about his character, is it free
Okay.
will or is this fated to happen and he's being pushed along by fate?
Prophecy.
And I think that's up for debate in just about any series where that's an aspect.
Yeah, and
Well,
that,
this is
go ahead, Glenn.
Overall, you'd agree this series has aged well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
definitely. And definitely. And one thing, in the end, it turned out that the Jureki and Editu knew from what background Simon came. They were aware of it.
Yeah, they just didn't want to tell him because they thought it would distract them.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think was a good call.
Yeah, that definitely was good for the story. But so in a sense, he didn't have agency because in the end, this would have been the result. It would have been put up to him, and whatever the outcome was, this this would have been told to him in the end.
How do you feel about the romance in this book, this series? Not just this book, but the trilogy overall. We've got a couple of romances, 3 of them going on. We don't see a lot of Benebek and Siski, but there's that. There's Joshua and Borsheva, and then we've got Simon and Miriam.
I mean, Simon and Miriam are as awkward and indecisive as teenagers are, so it makes complete and total sense. So I think it's done realistically. Is it a romance that you're gonna spend time on fantasizing about? No, because it's an awkward teenage romance that should feel that way. She's stalking him in the beginning, which is a little weird. So I mean, you got to keep that in mind.
I forgot about that for a second. Yeah, basically, she was stalking him.
Yeah,
and I must confess that you all also forget for the background characters, Iskrimur and Gudrun.
Yeah.
Still there.
Relationship there.
And I think there are some other. There is the, well, for lack of better word, motherly love from Rachel to Simon as well. Yeah. That's not really a romance. That is a parent, child thing, but still. There are not very hot steaming moments in that, and I think that's okay for my fantasy, but I'm not really interested in that well, I would think that only distracts from the main storyline. But it is there. It shows that those are genuine people. The characters are genuine. They have feelings. They have things go bad. They get angry at each other. Joshua and Foreza. What is it? Well, they are a classic. Well, the pink cloud is over couple. Shall we put it that way? And they are fighting for where are we going from here? And they find something.
Which is a realistic relationship for anybody who's been married for a number of years.
Exactly. Definitely. And that is for the romantic relationships in they are all in their own right realistic.
Yeah,
I think.
I'd agree.
I think the relationships are a lot more realistic than a certain other fantasy series that we all love, which the author was notoriously bad at writing romance most of the time.
Most of the time. He has some shining moments, but most of the time it's not done well.
Anything else anybody wants to bring up?
Yeah, like I said, this has become my favorite trilogy in fantasy. So I want to thank Peter for, wanting us to read this. It was on my list forever. And like I said, if it's on yours, you need to move it up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you for inviting me because I hadn't read it for quite some time. I think 10, 15 years ago for the last time. And this was very good. This was a very nice read along together. So
yeah, it was fun.
Definitely.
Thank you again for coming on. Thank you, as Bill says, for suggesting this book. I'm glad you did. I needed to do a reread of this, and this was the perfect excuse. And we've got a new convert, Bill, so that's awesome. I love turning people on new series and having them fall in love with the books. So thank you at home for watching. We've had a great time discussing these books. We'll be returning in 3 weeks with Josh from The Way of the Leaf, and we will be discussing the uncut edition of Robert Heinlein's A Stranger in a Strange Land. A very contentious book, but that's Heinlein.
It has sex.
Oh, no. Sex. Oh, shocking. So come back for that. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to be awesome.
See ya.